What I was saying earlier, Daniel, is I served in the military in Ranger Regiment as a sniper, did multiple combat tours in Iraq. And, that was really my first exposure to really learning about what it means to be a resilient human. And although, that wasn't really the word that was used. Actually, there wasn't really, no one really talked about resiliency much until, um, kind of shit hit the fan on deployment and we got some training, but, I'll get to that later. But, being resilient is just sort of baked into the culture of the military. There's the Army values leadership, duty, respect, self-service, honor, integrity, and personal courage. And that's something that you have to learn, starting day one in basic training. And at first, those things seem just like, I don't know, not really important. But as you go throughout your service in the military, and you train with men, and you're doing things like jumping out of airplanes, you're going into live fire shoot houses where you have to trust the members of your team to be paying attention, to be doing a good job. You rely on everybody to be physically fit, because if you're in combat and you get shot, somebody's going to have to pick you up and your 70 pounds of armor and your weapon and carry you out of there to safety, possibly, right? And you need to be able to do that for everyone else. So when you think about resiliency in the military, it's absolutely on an individual level, mentally, physically, but also on your team and unit level. The types of leaders that you have, the way that they not just train you to do your job, but also manage the level of readiness that exists within your battalion. So this goes all the way up to, battalion command level, and things that they're doing to make sure that all the men in that battalion are ready to deploy. And that also extends to the family, right? Making sure that guys have time to spend with their wife when it's possible, and the divorce rate in the military is, very high. I'm sure you guys have all heard that before, especially when you get into, sort of your specialty units like Ranger Regiment or Special Forces, SEALs. Most of those dudes are retired or divorced after a while, or single. But having your home life be solid and good to go absolutely affects somebody's readiness level or resiliency, right? Because if your wife hates you and your home life sucks, then your head's not going to be in the game. You're not going to train right. You're going to be distracted. So they have a saying in the military, I know it's not unique to the Army, that you're a leader 24/7. And although this talk is about resiliency, leadership is such a huge part of that. By the time I got out of the military, I was a staff sergeant. So, I was a squad level or, section level leadership. And, I lived 45 minutes from base, but I was in the barracks an hour, 45 minutes to an hour before first formation, going in there and making sure that those guys' personal hygiene was good and that they're keeping their rooms clean, and, teaching them about how to be disciplined, making sure that they were going to show up, they weren't hungover, all that kind of stuff, staying late, at work on a Friday night because I had two guys that were going to a school, and although I would do it in a very funny way, make sure that they had everything on their packing list, which is basically me sitting in a chair at the end of the hallway on the third floor when they lived on the first floor and reading one item at a time. Like 4 pairs of green wool socks, go. um, but I'll be there, on base working with guys till 11 o'clock, midnight sometimes, even though my wife was at home sitting at, where they were waiting on me. And that really, it's those kinds of things that enhance the resiliency and the camaraderie and the connection that you have with your team and your unit. So I just kind of wanted to talk about the culture a little bit. I'm sure I'll talk about it more a little bit later on, but just to kind of set the stage for what the culture is, because the expectation is that there you don't have downtime. If somebody in your platoon goes out and gets a DUI on the weekend, it's everyone's fault, to the point of it could be 2 o'clock in the morning and your first sergeant will get contacted by the police department or wherever if somebody gets arrested, and then they'll send out a text and expect every single person in that company to be in formation in like 30 minutes. It doesn't matter if you've been drinking yourself. This has happened before. I've experienced this in Charlotte Company, getting called in at like 2 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and we did a 6-mile Zodiac run, and it was awful. But nobody fails in isolation. Like if one person fails, it's because everybody else let them down. That everybody's supposed to have a plan, and it's up to everybody else to make sure that somebody's not going to be stupid and go out and drink and drive, right? So on an individual level, one of the things that really, like the biggest thing that I picked up from my time serving in the military was learning how to overcome mental limitations. Oftentimes people have asked me, what was the best thing I got from my time in the service? And I would say absolutely that, number one, because day in and day out, you're expected to show up and perform at a professional athlete level. And you might be on a 5-mile body armor run with a gas mask, and it's just you and your squad. You can't fall out of that run, because if you can't keep up with the group, one, everyone will hate you. I mean, bottom line. But it's hard on purpose. They say everybody in the military says train harder than you fight, because pushing yourself to do something harder than what you think that you can do in training will enable you to be able to function that way in real life combat scenarios where it matters the most. And you guys have probably all experienced it yourself in some way, where you hear that sound in your head. It's just like, I can't do this. It's too hard, and your brain will start to try to convince you that you're going to die. You're going to pass out, like, and it can be all kinds of things. It doesn't have to just be exercise. It can be, trying to commit to something like this program, like commit to a healthy diet, a healthy lifestyle, and you haven't eaten in 12 hours, and you start to try to convince yourself that you need to, it's important. But in reality, you don't. And the more that you're capable of sticking to what you said you were going to do, to pushing past those uncomfortable situations like Milan was talking about the other night, the more you're going to be able to achieve, because for me, just getting into Ranger Regiment itself, going through selection, being smoked for 8 hours, holding a 20-pound rock over my head for an hour, like all that shit hurt and stuff that, there's plenty of moments where I didn't think that I was going to be able to continue on, but I just ignored that and just kept going. And what I found was that every single time that I did that, eventually it would end, the run would end, I'd be able to put the rock down, the smoke session would stop. And after about a 2-minute breather, I was fine. So it became ever more present on my mind that your brain wants to quit long before your body can, you can do so much more than what you think you can. And it's like it's like a skill, like anything else. If you want to get better at math, do math. If you want to become more resilient, if you want to be more in charge of yourself, physically, mentally, spiritually, you need to continuously train, make those deposits of self-discipline into your discipline account instead of making withdrawals, where you give in, eat the fries and cheeseburger and Coke and make excuses instead of making improvements. So like I was saying, on an individual level, that was something that, pretty much everybody in the military, at least in special operations, deals with almost every single day. And it's on purpose, we would intentionally make things harder and more difficult so that way we have to go through that process. Like being comfortable is not going to make you better. So, that's also part of the culture of being in the military, especially places like Ranger Regiment or, working in a sniper team. On deployment, you've got all of that, right? So like in Iraq, for at least 9 months out of the year, it's 130 degrees. It might get to 120 at night. But 130 degrees, like I'm in Nevada in summertime and it's been 100 and I'm like, holy smokes, this is awful. How did I deal with that? 130 degrees, like doing foot patrols all day, wearing 70 pounds of armor and walking around for 8 hours, then come back to the base, go hit the gym and work out for 2 hours with my Samoan workout buddy, and then go eat and then and be just fine. Number one, drink water. That was oral rehydration, salts and water definitely helped, but it was the mindset and the training. At war there is no I can't. That's not an option. You can't just like give up walking on a foot patrol because you're hot. Um, it's just not going to happen. So physically, it's very demanding to do that stuff. It's also stressful, when you start getting engaged by a machine gun, your adrenaline hormones are cranking. You could be doing absolutely nothing, pouring sweat, because your adrenaline is pumping so hard, and it's also terrifying. I definitely have seen people lock up and freeze and just, you got to yell at them like, hey, dumbass, like, let's go, or start fucking shooting. That happens sometimes, but what's worse is when one of your own gets hurt or dies or killed, and unfortunately you know I've I've experienced that. I've witnessed that. I've personally been blown up myself, but I've witnessed men in my platoon get blown up by a buried ID right in front of me, and was the first one to respond to it, and it was awful. I'm not going to go into the details of what that was like, but it was probably the worst thing that I've ever experienced. To see that, and it's something that sometimes still haunts me to this day. And we had a series of really bad incidents occur towards the end of my last deployment, just kind of back to back to back. And it led to a point to where our battalion commander had to meet with our platoon, because there's no like downtime on deployment, really. Like, you have the schedule of rotation to go out and do your job. And guys were stressed to the point to where they were just like, quit taking care of themselves, talking about if they were sent out, just smoking whoever they saw, basically just going out and deleting grid squares because they were just fed up and done with everything that had happened. And when you get blown up by an IED, normally there's nobody to fight, and it makes it that much worse because you're dealing with the devastation of men that are your friends, your comrades, that are dead or severely injured, and you're trying to take care of it, and you're angry, but there's no like release because there's nobody to smoke. So everybody, like, pretty much from at the platoon leader, platoon sergeant down, squad leaders, privates, team leaders, were just like, no, we're not going back out. I'm done with this. Making threats. Like I said, people weren't taking care of themselves. They had the whole platoon, on Ambien and stuff because no one could sleep because of all the horrible things that they were seeing every time they closed their eyes. And so our battalion commander got to meet with, he met with our whole platoon, and that's what basically everyone was sharing. They're like, we're devastated. We don't really feel like we can move on functionally. And I had this idea because I had been up into the green zone, which is supposed to be like a combatant area of Baghdad, basically right up against Baghdad International Airport, and it's where the embassy is. It's where like a lot of your civilian contract companies and State Department operate out of, and it's pretty chill. I went up there to secure a passport because I was planning on going to Costa Rica when I got back, and had gotten stuck there for a while, and I knew that it had pools and stuff that you could hang out at, and just listening to everybody share their story, I thought, I told the battalion commander, I was like, why don't, none of us are going to get any kind of closure from this. And, really what we need is a break to kind of distance ourselves from the situation for a while, but also be there for each other. And I was like, if we could go, as a platoon up into the green zone with mental health experts to be there to support us, provide training and how to overcome these kinds of things, and we could kind of be there, support each other, to talk about the stuff that we're dealing with, because some guys were full on hallucinating. I mean, there is a point, not in that moment, but actually a couple weeks later, it was the first time I had gone out where EOD, explosive ordnance disposal, was going out and responding to a cache site at night. And it was so large that they ran out of C4 and they needed more C4, a lot of C4. And nobody wanted to go out, man. It's like that was the shittiest time to go be in a convoy. I was driving around at night on dirt roads, where it was even more difficult to see, wires or pressure plates or anything like that could blow you up. Nobody wanted to go, so I'm like, fuck it, I'll go. I mean, I didn't go by myself, but I was one of the people, and me and this other guy were smoking a Gurkha Warlord, just like bouncing around in the back of this MRAP, sitting on cases of C4. It's like, whatever, man. If it goes down, it goes down. There won't be much of us left. But as we were bringing the C4 up there, there was a vehicle-borne IED, which is basically a vehicle that was rigged to explode, that was identified by someone, I'm not sure who, but they were able to identify the fact that this vehicle is rigged to blow up, and it was between us and explosive ordnance disposal team that was out there. So then we had to sit and wait for another EOD team to come, and I'm just sitting in the back of this vehicle with just like a red light on. And I remember turning and looking at the ramp in the back of the vehicle and seeing, or no, it was directly across from me. There was an empty seat directly across from me. And the guy that I had dug chunks of out of a vehicle a couple of weeks previously, I saw him slumped over in the chair that looks like this, and it looked so real, and I mean, needless to say, it kind of freaked me out a little bit, because even when I looked away and looked back, he was still there, and I was just like, I was fine before that, I mean, I felt fine. But anyway, so that level of trauma can manifest in a lot of ways, and I wasn't the only one that was experiencing stuff like that, so our battalion commander agreed. He thought it was a great idea. He sent us all up to the green zone to do exactly that. We get to stay in basically what kind of looked like the closest thing to a resort in Baghdad that you could think of, with a giant Olympic pool, dive boards and stuff, really nice chow hall. And they sent the top psychiatrist in charge of all of mental health in the Operation Iraqi Freedom at the time to come give us a course on resilience. And it was very impactful for all of us. I've actually had conversations with several of those guys that were there for that presentation, and independently, before I've even said anything about it, they talked about how they're an open book. They talk about what they're experiencing and going through. They share their story with other people, because basically what that guy said is that is one of the key ways of being resilient to the effects of stress, to death, to anything that's very traumatic, is talking to other people about it. If you're hallucinating, seeing weird shit, if you feel like crying, or you did cry, or whatever, try to let go of the idea of it being embarrassing and be vulnerable. That vulnerability like it gets rid of that fear of what's going on, like it's more powerful than shame or guilt. And it's a significant part of the healing process. And if the desired outcome is resilience, to be able to function again, to be able to go back and do your job, or function in your relationships, or be a good dad or friend or whatever, or to just be happy, talking to somebody else about what you're dealing with, as simple as it sounds, will really help you get through it, because the brain is, it's wild. It stores feelings and emotions with the memories, so that's why, certain things can be a trigger, like for me, loud noises. I've had plenty of times where everybody's lighting their fireworks off in the neighborhood, those little mortar ones that, boom, hate those. And in moments where I was already stressed and didn't really know how to handle all these things, like had full-blown panic attacks. And yeah, that's pretty common for combat veterans. But like I said, the vulnerability aspect, like connecting with other people and sharing and not being afraid to, will really significantly enhance your own resilience. And it also, for me, I think of vulnerability as a really important characteristic of leadership. Going back to like what I was talking about earlier, by demonstrating what it looks like, to be vulnerable, to be seen without fear of judgment, and just be genuine. Not only does it, very healing for you to be able to be genuine like that, but it also kind of creates space for others, whether they're your peers, your employees, your family members or friends, or sometimes even your superiors. A lot of people in leadership positions think that they have to have it all figured out, but just by doing something as simple as admitting that you're wrong, or asking for help, and not being afraid to do so, obviously it can have a significant impact on organizational readiness and resiliency, because it can improve communication, conflict resolution, problem solving, any of that kind of stuff. So yeah, that's my piece on vulnerability and resilience. Like it really is significant. And in my opinion, allowing yourself to be vulnerable is probably one of the most courageous things that you can do, because it does take courage. We always feel a need to protect our egos, and but that's not really who we are. Our ego is a social construct from the feedback that we've gotten from the world, not who we are. So there's that. And then let's see what else. I'll tell you a big one, as far as resiliency goes, and soldiers and veterans in the military, is humor, man. Like we got some dark humor, dead baby jokes, all of it, joking around about. I mean, I remember we used to get, and this is going to sound really screwed up based on all the things that I've just been talking about, but we used to have these equal opportunity briefings quarterly, and it would be EO, sexual harassment, and suicide. And it was usually some like E4 specialist from supply that was like tasked with going around and making sure everybody is receiving their EO training and suicide training and stuff. And I remember, like it was the same PowerPoint every time. And this dipshit would be like, can somebody please tell me why people decide to commit suicide? Not like, ooh, 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 ooh. Like it's because it's the most sincere form of self-criticism, which is really fucked up. I mean, I've, several years ago, personally was there and tried to take my own life and felt like doing so for years. And it's a terrifying feeling. I don't ever want to go back to feeling that way, but like it's just that's how we would handle traumatic, fucked up shit. It was just make jokes about it. And it works. So maybe making jokes about suicide around people at work, probably not a good idea. But it's just it's kind of another tool that you can throw into your resiliency toolkit is if you start feeling yourself getting real serious and you're having a hard time, or the people around you are struggling and having a hard time, maybe crack a joke about it. It'll definitely get you through some hard shit. The other thing and this is the last thing really I'd like to point out, that I think is really important to understand is when you look at, hopefully you are able to identify what you would refer to as like your tribe, right? Your community, your family, that you connect with. And it could be, people at work, maybe just certain people at work, whatever your tribe is, you know who they are. But there's really a lot to be said for having some kind of common ground, like a shared struggle. For the military, it's our culture. It's man, that run was fucking sucked. But we made it. Or damn, that deployment was awful. But we made it. And you just have this kind of like understanding, and it could be, if you're religious, it could be other people that you go to church with. It could be some sort of ethnic cultural ties, that kind of connects you. But I don't know. I think, like I was saying earlier, I think about a lot of this stuff in terms of like leadership and providing an example, being the type of person that cares enough or is willing to or has the strength to provide an example, because like everybody's heard about the rough go of it that combat veterans have, but the bottom line is really that's just one small subset of the population. Everybody's dealing with some sort of trauma. They feel isolated, at least maybe even just mentally they isolate themselves because they're it's increasingly more difficult to relate to other people. I definitely felt that when I got out. And it makes it difficult to be resilient when something happens in your life, like going through a breakup or something, when you feel like everybody else is a fucking retard and doesn't understand you. Then you're trying to work through and deal with all that shit on your own, and some people can and some people can't. hopefully, what we'd all like is to have something shitty happen and be able to drive through it with grace, you know, um, not make a fool of ourselves, not go out and get pissed drunk because, we feel sorry for ourselves, or we don't know, we don't have any other better ways of handling it, which is in the end is really just going to make us worse. Some people never get off that train, and just continue to cope with their problems by not dealing with them, by drinking, doing drugs. There's all kinds of self-sabotage behaviors that people engage in to avoid addressing their demons. And I think that's really why I wanted to share this story with you guys tonight, is because it seems to make sense for everybody that a combat veteran would learn to be resilient, or hopefully learn to be resilient, or be, have some shit they have to overcome. But, you don't have to go to war to have something really bad happen to you, or that some kind of traumatizing thing that you're suffering from that's still fucking your life up. It's a lot of stuff, and I'll be the first one to admit to you, like, I still have a lot of childhood trauma that I'm still trying to work through, and I'm sure some of that, probably set me up for failure going through these kinds of experiences, because there's guys that are, way more badass than me, that have been on 15 deployments, that, have seen way more horrible things. But it's not a useful exercise to compare your own traumatic experiences with someone else's, because at the end of the day, we're all a product of the way that we perceive the world. If we were all hanging out and someone got smoked in the face, like shot point blank by a 45, I would probably like laugh out loud, just like everyone else would be like, holy shit, you're fucked up, dude, or everyone would be freaking out, running away. I'd be trying to figure out if he actually deserved it or not, and that's just an extreme example of why, like, it doesn't matter what your trauma is. If it's a big deal to you, it's a big deal, and hopefully some of the stuff that I share with you about, overcoming your mental limitations, laughing, engaging with your tribe, and thinking about what it means to provide leadership in this way can help you help yourself or help someone else. Sometimes just having the self-imposed task and purpose of being that kind of person for somebody else, being there for somebody else, will help you get through your own shit, because maybe you see a little bit of value in yourself, because you're like, man, these people need me, or this person needs me, this dog needs me, so that's pretty much all I've got prepared for this speech. I would love it if you guys had any questions. Feel free to ask me whatever you want.
I know there's questions here, guys. Come on.
Like, what kind of mindset do you get yourself into when you're going through physical pain, where you're at the point where, like, wow, this is a lot. I don't know if I can do it. You just think to yourself, like, man, the fuck up, you're being a little bitch, or what?
Yeah, DBAP is probably a big one. Don't be a pussy. I'm really hard. I really am pretty tough on myself. It's hard for me sometimes to not be that way, like I always feel like I could be doing more, doing better. So anytime I start hearing those little sounds where I'm like start feeling sorry for myself, I change that voice to like Arnold being like, try harder. you know or I just kind of reframe things in my head to, I mean, I don't know what kind of pain you're talking about specifically. Like, I wouldn't intentionally injure myself, uh, unless I was trying to save somebody else. But if it's like in a workout and I'm like feeling a real sharp pain, I'm gonna stop the exercise and do something else. Um, but if it's just, I'm feeling like a fat ass on a run and my ribs hurt and my calves are sore and my thighs are on fire and my lungs are on fire, then, you know, I'm probably just going to push through and keep going, within reason. Um, because actually, I was just having a conversation with another veteran friend of mine earlier, Brian, him, Lewis,
Yeah.
and we were talking about focusing on the internal versus the external, because your external is sort of a reflection of what's going on the inside. And so if your goal with working out is, I want to look good, like, who are you doing that for? There's nothing wrong with building your body to look good, but focusing on, if your why is, I want to look good, then that might not be enough to carry you through shit. You know what I mean? But if your why is, I'm working out because I want to be healthy and I want to have energy to be able to do the things that I want to in my life. I want to, increase my cognitive horsepower so that way I can, start this little side hustle business or whatever, get a promotion, be a better dad, husband, whatever, any of those things. Like, I think those things are a lot more important. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but that's just kind of how I think about it.
But
Yeah, I want to add to that. I also personally do a lot of DBAP. I mean, I usually say don't be a bitch, so it's DBAB, or don't be weak or something like that. But I think what Jim said for me personally helps me and has helped me in my own experience in the military and just in life get through hard times is understanding the value of the pain, which is not always the case. Sometimes you have pain and there's no meaningful reason for going through it. But when you're going and doing something, like work, or you're going to the gym, like Jim said, it's all for a positive outcome. And if you can remind yourself what that positive outcome leads to, like how Jim was also saying, you'll feel better. You're looking to gain a better health status, whatever it may be. If you can really inject value into that, so say you gain a better health status by going to the gym, eating healthy, well, what's going to come from that? You're going to be more capable of being, having the energy to be there for your kids, for your wife, to be a better husband, just to be a better person, to show up to the job, feel better, do more, push out more, give more from your unit, your body. So if you can remember that, inject that value into your brain when you're suffering with a workout or when you're suffering during work, to push yourself to do more, that the outcome in the end, is something more than just, the outcome. It trickles down into many areas of your life. So for me, that like long-term final outcome is what I use to help push me through the pain, along with the DBAP.
Keep that in the back of my head. Don't be a
Yeah.
bitch.
Exactly.
Don't be a pussy.
Yeah, one thing that Jim said too that I want to reiterate on is the mention of like comparing your own trauma to someone else's. Like everyone really does experience and perceive their entire global outlook on life like so differently. And it's when you start comparing like, apples to oranges and combat veterans to trauma victims that have gone through this, or rape victims to, someone that lost somebody, or all these different things, like you're just making like it worse for yourself, because every single person's going to experience their own versions of that trauma differently. And there's different phases of our lives that we're going through those trauma, like where it might have impacted that person differently than it would have if it happened in a different stage of their life. But you can't really even compare those, because like Jim said, like, I mean, everybody takes and perceives trauma differently. So the way that you react to that trauma is really going to be like what's going to get you through it. And I know myself, like in my own past trauma, like I really coped with it like the worst ways, drinking and really just not facing the pain, not facing it head on. Kind of just like not letting it impact me like it didn't, but even though it really did. And I think it's been like almost 6 months now, and like I really let so much pain and trauma build up in my life from over the past few years. And it just kind of like, I was like, I'm done. I need to like face this head on, and I want to become the best version of myself. I don't want to be stuck in bed feeling shitty and feeling sorry for myself ever again. I literally told myself I'm done. I quit drinking until a point where, I feel better. Like, and who even knows if I ever will ever drink again? I don't know that, but I've actually been sober for almost 6 months now. And it was because of the fact that this was negatively impacting my life, and all this trauma that I had gone through myself, I kind of just let it build up. And, there's a long list of things, and I'm not going to start naming them out here, but regardless, like for me to be the most prime and optimal version of myself, I knew that I had to just take discipline head on in every single aspect of my life. And that's exactly what I did. And I mean, don't get me wrong, I was doing that already, but like I took it up to like a different level of performance, like, a complete peak performance. And before we got on this call just now, like I was talking about how tired I was, and I just listened to what Jim was saying. And I'm like, wow, I'm a fucking bitch. I'm pussy,
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Damn
all
right,
like,
son.
100 degrees, no AC. Yeah.
But I
Fuck
mean,
that.
like, yeah, and sleep really is so important for you. It's one thing I always talk about. Like when I sleep like perfectly, like, and I get like my 7 to 9 hours, my performance is through the fucking roof. And it affects me so differently. But today I got like 3 hours, and it doesn't matter. I woke up, I did my shit, I went to the gym, I got my work done. I know it was not as good as I had hoped of, like for a Monday, but it's a Monday. Things can be better, but there's always a Tuesday to improve yourself and get a better night's sleep tonight. But regardless, I thought of all that stuff that Jim was saying, and I was like, wow, I'm not gonna. I was thinking like I'm gonna get off this call and I'm gonna go straight to sleep. No chance. I'm gonna make some nice protein food and do a little bit more work, and then I'm gonna get my good 7 hours of sleep, and I'm gonna get up and I'm gonna do it all again tomorrow. Because keeping that mindset and just focusing on things that are gonna actually help you and deposit in that piggy bank that he was talking about. It's so true. That's what's going to make you the best version of yourself. And that's what's going to make you disciplined in every aspect of your life that you're trying to approach. And it's going to come, it's going to come in work. It's going to come in your relationships with your friends and your family. It's your partners that you have, every single aspect that you can think of. Like, I'm sure for a fact deep down that you can improve that some way. And I have that same mindset that Jim was talking about. We literally spoke about it on Saturday. Is I feel like I could doing better. I know I can be doing better. And that's just the way that I'm going to always approach life. And I know it because there's always that version of myself that I'm trying to aspire to be. And whether that's the version tomorrow or the version the next day, I think David Goggins really talks about it the best is when he was comparing himself to like, he died and he went to heaven and he's at the gates of heaven, and God's comparing him to different versions of himself and like what he could have been. And I think that's the biggest analogy that I always think about when I'm in that dark place, I'm doing Murph or I'm doing something, and that voice in my head just is telling me, you're gonna pass out. Like you're getting tired. You can't do this, like you're gonna die if you keep doing this. It's all bullshit. You just got to turn that noise off. It's all background noise, and just keep
Trained hard
fighting.
yesterday.
What's that?
You trained hard yesterday. You can take it easy today.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Back to the physical pain aspect. I got a pen. I'm gonna write down. I know you guys know some good vitamins and supplements that I can be taking for joint health and energy and muscle recovery, other than creatine.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
I would.
What would be some good things I should invest in
Here, let me
I'll-
stop recording this real quick.
to help with those things?
I'll have to say this before